We'll start recording now. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us in this meeting. We're going to start this series of what I call Still in Touch. This meeting will be, this series of meeting will be some conversations and presentations with the member of the FIVB Rules and Refereeing Commission and former chairman of the and secretary of the Rules of the Game Commission, and the legendary professor of volleyball and refereeing, Mr. Sandy Steel.
Oh, hello. Very nice to be here. If I can say this, it's a real pleasure to be here and a real honor as well to be invited to take part in this. When you get to my age, you think nobody wants to hear what you want to say anymore. But your invitation to us all on WhatsApp, I kept looking at that and thinking, who is this guy? He sounds really interesting. Maybe I should tune in and hear something and learn something about volleyball. But that was just a feeling that I had. It was a very fine introduction that you gave to me, and I have to say that. It kind of flatters me a little bit, you know. I don't really think of myself in those terms, but okay, it's nice to be here anyway.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, if I'm going to start with all the titles that you have, well, you sent me on your bios, we're going to spend here 20 minutes on this and on that, but I just put on the highlights and everything. First of all, on this meeting is going to have two parts. First part, we're going to talk a little bit about your career, your personality, who are you, Sandy Steel, and everything. And then we're going to pass to a presentation, some kind of slideshow that you prepared. And we're going to talk about that as well. So first question is always to everybody who I talk to, what is your first memory of volleyball in your life? How volleyball entered your life?
Well, it's very interesting how that happened. I moved from one school to another school in my late secondary stage, and the new school had this game called volleyball, which I had never heard of it. And I have to say, we played in a gymnasium, small gymnasium. We stretched a net across between the wall bars, and I don't know, it looked like 20 people per team, you know? And we just tried to keep the ball in the air, and then the big guys would try and hit it hard over the net to the opponent. I was very bad. I have to say, I was a very bad player, because I really didn't know the rules, and as I learned to my cost later, you really do need to know what you're doing in order to play. So that was my first attempts, very bad attempts, very poor attempts to play volleyball. But later, when I went to university, a group of us from the same school got together and kind of formed a volleyball club, and I was invited to join. So at that point, it became a little bit more serious, and I actually had to learn how to train and do overhand pass and do digs and so on. So these were the things that we really had never done before at school. We just, you know, messed around basically. But this was what my beginnings were in 1966. That's when I started to play, when I was 16 years old, I think.
I think I remember that when I was young also. I saw you there somewhere.
So anyway, that's the first memory that I have, and you know, it was developed through my time at university. We played. We went on tour. Finally, actually, a lot of my colleagues, my school friends, they left for one reason or another, and I was left alone, as it were. And I ended up being the coach of the team. I ended up being a referee sometimes. Ended up being a player. So all sorts of things would happen, and just had to get on with it. So that was really a kind of grounding of where I was and what I was going to do, and I realized that I was just going to stick it out, and I was going to do my very best, and I think that's what I've done ever since.
Very nice. I mean, so you can say that you're part of being a referee or a player with a small part in the whole history of volleyball in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose so, because I was coached to the national under-16 team at one time for 2 years. I coached a first division women's team in my country. But basically, refereeing was the thing that gave me the most pleasure, most satisfaction in the game. So that's why I really developed that aspect, and I wanted to do as well as I possibly could. I'd always heard about this thing called the Rules of the Game Commission, but I never really knew much about it. I learned the rules as best I could, and then that seemed to be a very good aspect of FIVB, that they had this thing, this organization, this commission, which dealt with rules, and it was something that I developed a passion for. I developed a liking for. I developed an interest in. I became good at it, I think. So that was the direction that I took.
Okay. At the age of 40, you became a member of the FIVB Rules of the Game Commission. Now, as you came from a very powerful and a main volleyball country of the world, such a
Okay.
big and long experience, how did this happen? How?
Well, you see, I had been an international referee. Okay, I attended my international course in 1970.
Just unmute yourself.
Okay, right. You still on? So anyway, I attended a course in Landskrona in Sweden in 1977. It was the same course that Andre Meyer was on. He and I were colleague referees, candidate referees at the same time. The course was run by Dr. Andre Holve and Mr. Arno Herman from Germany.
Sorry. Please unmute. Please mute your microphones, please.
Okay. Right. So anyway, Andre Holve, Arno Herman, and it was conducted in 2 languages. And after that, I did referee in Europe and also domestically and nationally and some small internationals and so on. I was an average referee. I have to be honest. I was not the greatest referee in the universe, but I had always had this interest. I mentioned the Rules of the Game Commission, and I've always had this interest in the way that words were put together to make sense of what we did. And at that time, FIVB was very good at sending out in advance of the changes what they were going to do, what they planned to do, and ask for comments. So I would always make comments because I thought that's what you did. So out of the blue, I got a written letter from Ruben Costa, who was then president of FIVB. I never met Ruben. I didn't know anything about Ruben. But I got a letter saying, would you like to join the Rules of the Game Commission? And from that moment, I joined. I was doing World Championships and so on. So all those sort of things came to me very early. So I was very lucky. And as a result of that, I suppose, I became secretary, and then finally member again, then secretary again, and then finally I became president in 2002.
Can you pinpoint what are the things you did and have that made you your long career at the FIVB Commission last for so long?
Well, you see, I work cheap. Yeah, I never sought high office. I'll be honest with you. I never sought to be secretary of the commission. I never sought to be president of the commission. In fact, when Ruben Acosta phoned me up in the end of 2001 to tell me Dr. Ma who was my previous president, he was retiring, and he had suggested that I could take over, I could do the job. And I basically said to Dr. Costa, no, thank you. And half an hour later, he had beaten me into submission. Because basically, I was a teacher. I taught chemistry for 42 years, and that was what I did. And I had a limited amount of time that I could take to do all the presidential things. Mm-hmm. And finally, Ruben accepted the fact that was the situation, but he did beat me into submission, and bloodied and bowed, I finally agreed that I would become president of the commission. And I stayed there for 14 years.
That's pretty long time. That's really pretty long time.
But I told you, I work cheap. I'm not an expensive person.
Tell us your opinion about evaluation of volleyball and the commissions, the evolution of volleyball and the commissions throughout the years.
Well, okay, let's go back to the early 90s. In the early 90s, it was quite a fevered time, as it were. We had a lot of very high-powered people within the commission. Both refereeing commission and with the rules of the game commission. And I'll be honest, although some people occasionally said there was friction between the two commissions, I never found that. I found that there was a huge respect between the two commissions, and I got on fabulously well with Andre Holvey. And I think he trusted me to do various things, and so he was refereeing commission president, and I had Dr. Ma also on my side as president of the Rules of the Game Commission, and at night time, after the work of the commission during the day in Lausanne, we would go back to the hotel, and we would just go to each other's rooms, and there would be 5 of us in a hotel room, all throwing ideas around, basically doing a stress test on all the wordings that we had put together, all the ideas that we put together. And this was a fabulous time for getting real ideas down on paper and moving forward with the game. And so we did lots of changes at that time. Early things that we did were things like the net fault rule. Now, you probably don't remember, Roy, but in the early 90s, there was a thing called the 5 principles. And the 5 principles were basically you had to meet these 5 principles in order to whistle a net fault. Now, can you imagine, as a referee, you're standing there, Olympic finals, and you're trying to think, now, does that do 4 of the 5 or all of the 5? so it kind of very quickly, I think, died a death, and we did other things. We tried to modify the center line rule, and fortunately, because I don't really think we did it awfully well, Congress said, no, we don't like that one. You're not doing that. So we cancelled that one. And I remember colleagues like Kainu Mikkola and people like Jim Coleman. These are fabulous characters. Now we have Laszlo Herpai, we have Willie Paredes. You know, we have people who actually understand the game really well and understand what the game has to do to develop and to make it the #1 family sporting game in the world. You know, and that's really what Ari Grassa wants. It's got to be the #1 family sport in the world, so that we can attract more and more young people. But we did lots of other things too. We developed, well, actually, to be honest, he's listening just now, but Laszlo did it. Laszlo was really the father of the libero in a sense of how we actually developed that particular rule. And I hope I'm not embarrassing him by saying this just now, but I remember he and Jacek Spisak being taken away into a small corner and saying, "Go on, write the libero rule." You know, we had a recipe from the World League Council, but no rules. It was simply this is what kind of thing we want you to do. So Laszlo and Jacek came back with a set of rules about the libero, and so that was fabulous. We also developed things like the net service rule. You know how now the ball can hit the net on service and go over, and I wrote that with Jim Coleman in his house in San Diego, because I used to get money from my government to actually go and do fun things in the days when there was money to actually spend. But we used to go and we would play beach volleyball in the morning. Okay, Rui, are you listening to me? Rui, we played beach volleyball.
There's a question about that that's going to come up later on. It's already done there.
And we would write the rules in the afternoon and the evening, you know, and it was a great time. And so that particular rule came out of watching a game where there was the camera was locked down, simply focused on the center line under net, and the two of us watched this game between USA and Japan, and we didn't see any play. All we saw was the ball hitting the net, side out, ball hitting the net, side out, some mopping, ball hitting the net, side out. So we thought, got to do something. This is crazy. How can we make this really a popular game if this is all people see? There's no rallies. So we created this particular rule, and it came to the commission, and we had intended it should be tested. We had intended it. And this is a warning to everybody. Please always test rules before you actually do these things. So it was intended to do this, and Ruben had come into the meeting, and Ruben was always good at arriving at the meetings at odd times, usually at critical moments. I'll not say any more than that. But anyway, he. Anyway, he said, "Oh, we don't need to test this. Let's just make it happen immediately." So they put it in action in the World Championships, and we were, "Oh my goodness, what are we going to do?" Oh, and so one of the early things that happened was the ball hit the net on service. Okay. It began to fall down to the floor on the server side, and the captain of Spain, as I remember, I think his name was Pasquale, I think his name was, reached under the net and caught the ball. And we all thought, what do we do now? It's like, okay, so immediately write another rule. So the rule had to be rewritten in the sense that the ball doesn't pass through the crossing space. That's the fault. Okay, so but we have other examples of that, and you know, we learn from our mistakes, and these are the sort of things that we can look back on and laugh about, but in reality it's something that we should take note of all the time.
You know, I'm trying to imagine this, you and your friends there, the co-members of the commission, sitting in a small, like how you wrote me, and like the attic, in a
Yeah.
small room, like
That's where we worked. Yeah, we worked in the old building, the old FIVB headquarters in Lausanne, Avenue de la Gare, and we were in the attic room. The attic room was actually really comfortable, but it was a very hard climb because there was no elevators. You know.
so I'm imagining like a Harry Potter scenery or
no.
those kind of scenery when they're sipping their drinks or something and have brainstormings and stuff.
Oh, we certainly had brainstormings, but we also had slides, and we didn't have at the early stages. Only Jim Coleman had a computer. He was the only one that had a computer. The rest of us used a pen. And then after that, we began to realize that we need to do a little bit more technology here because it makes our life much easier. But the nighttime sessions were probably as productive as the daytime sessions, really, and we always came away from those meetings with a sense of achievement. You know, it was fun. It was fun, and it was an atmosphere. You know, I can only liken this to what top scientists do when they're brainstorming about splitting the atom or that kind of thing. It was that kind of thing. But you asked me about the evolution of volleyball. Really, what we've been trying to do over the years is to develop Rubin's notion of its spectacularity as it was then, which is a word which doesn't exist, by the way, but I couldn't tell him that. And then we developed the let's keep the ball flying. That was the next one, and now it's the playing actions decide the rally of the result. So these are the sort of ways that we're going in, and so we're trying to not diminish the importance of the referee, but reduce the impact of some judgment calls that could be called into question. It kind of protects the referee in a sense from decision making that can have the finger pointed at them and say, hey, you didn't do that well. So, okay, but anyway, that's the reason. But what I would say is that no matter what we did, as a chemist, I would look at volleyball as a chemical reaction. This may seem strange to those of you who are listening just now, but you have internal passing and lots of player movement on one side. You have internal passing and lots of movement on the other side. You have a net in between. And it's kind of like what we call a chemical equilibrium. And a very famous scientist called Le Chatelier said that if you have a system in equilibrium and you subject it to some stress or some change, the system attempts to minimize that change. If it works against you. Now, in a volleyball sense, what happens is we change a rule. The coaches look at it and say, how do we get around that rule? So they do something else, and immediately you're back to square one. Now, when we did the libero, and we thought, this is fabulous. We have created this specialist defensive player, okay? And what happened was the specialist defensive player was the best passer in reception. And so you created a situation where you didn't get the defense because you never got that far. All you got was the good pass, good set, wallop, finish. So it did the opposite to what we had intended it should do. And therefore, you know, you've got to keep this in mind. You have to apply a stress test to almost every rule that you create to make sure that it does work and do what you intended it to do. It doesn't always do that. And I have to say that we get it wrong. We get it wrong sometimes, and we have to make modifications to that. But that's effectively what kind of things happen. So anyway, there we go.
Yeah. So I'll jump up a little bit by the list of questions, and I'll ask you, continuing this, in your imagination, how would volleyball evolve in the next? I mean, your esteem, experience and knowledge and everything. How can you imagine the volleyball in 10 or 30 years from now? What's going to be the next changes?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, and you referred to me as a professor of rules. Okay, I wish I was a professor, and I wish I had a crystal ball, and I wish I could see into the future. But in reality, let's go back to Barcelona, 1992, my first Olympic Games. Okay, could have been my last Olympic Games actually, and I'll tell you about that later if you want to ask me. But if you look at that set of players and those games, and you look at those of today, VNL finals, Olympic game finals, etc., as a casual observer, you really don't see much difference. You would see this strange, I shouldn't say strange, but anyway, this shorter player with a different uniform running around, you know, and and I remember some child being asked about the libero, and basically he said they didn't have enough uniforms to go around, so they just gave him a different one. So anyway, so we've got that modification. We've got libero now, 2 liberos in fact, and if you look at 1992, you didn't have those then. But the game essentially is pretty much as you would imagine it would have been then. And go back another 20 years before 1992, again, it looks pretty much the same. Yeah, the athletes nowadays are bigger, they're taller, they're hitting faster. Technology is making a huge difference to the referee's job because the game is so much faster now. You know, if you think back to previous times, we got by without earpieces and headsets and microphones and tablets on the post and little video machines on the post and so on. We didn't have the coach tablets, and so we didn't have any of that. I would imagine that because the game is getting faster and stronger, etc., we will have more technology. Mm-hmm. I would imagine that Hawkeye will develop something that gives us even more possibilities to automatic in and out. That Hawkeye will perhaps be able to look at different angles when the ball flies past the antenna from overhead cameras and so on. So those sort of things. At the moment, that's not so easy because the camera can't go high enough to actually see what the line judge can see. But when you begin to appreciate what the camera is showing us, it gives you a huge different perspective as a referee on what actually happened there. You know, we see the ball rebounding from the floor. Now, really, what we're seeing is the last segment of maybe 4 or 5 things that happen. The ball hits the floor, the ball compresses on the floor, the ball rotates forwards, like a balloon full of water, and then it rotates a little bit more, reflates, and then it leaves the floor. It leaves the floor outside the court, but actually contacted the floor inside the court. We don't see that. We don't see that first contact because our eyes just are not good enough. Human beings, no matter how superhuman they are or think they are, cannot see that. So the camera is the only thing that can show that to us. However, as a referee, you have to make a decision. And therefore, it makes sense to understand that. And maybe even when you've got camera support, okay, I emphasize this camera support, then you realize that a ball that's somewhere like 20 centimeters around about the line is likely to have made a small contact with that line. And sometimes you see on the Hawkeye pictures, you know, a millimeter. Okay, a millimeter of contact, and the coach goes, okay, fine. But it's true. It's true. You see that when you see the challenges, and to be fair, it has made a huge difference to the coaches, to the stress that the coaches are under. It's made a huge difference to the stress that the referees are under. It also, if I can say this, if Zoritz is listening. People like Zoritz, in fact, with their analytical abilities too and their support, are actually really able to do things behind the scenes that support that referee. Mm-hmm. You know, they can see things and they can confirm to the referee, yeah, you were right, or no, you were wrong, or whatever. Most often they'll actually say, yes, you were right, and if they were wrong, they'll keep the mouth shut. But that's for another day, and you can ask Zoritza to do one of these things herself to explain how the challenge referee functions. Okay, but it's an extremely important aspect that these people are there making a bigger team. So you've got a bigger team of referees able to support the game, and I assume things are in the pipeline, which I don't know if the board will ever pass, but we'll see. In Netherlands, for example, the first pass is like we have, but the second pass is much more flexible. Now, we're at the moment, let's see if that develops. It could be that's another judgment call that is removed from the referee. Okay, and it might actually be a benefit to the sport. If you remember when they allowed the ball to be played with any part of the body, okay, it started when I started to play, it was the waist, and then it was the knee, and then it was the waist, and then it was the foot, and so on. So it's gone up and down, up and down, up and down. If you go back, by the way, if you go back to a long time ago, way before FIVB, they actually played with the feet as well. So it's not something that has never happened before. These things come in cycles. You know, something that was a good idea in 1922 may also be a good idea in 2022. You know,
to have a 100 years celebration for that rule that come back.
Well, I intend to be around then. Okay, I'll live forever or die in the attempt. One of these things can happen. So anyway, back to what I was saying. So you've got that rule brought in, and immediately people said that will never work, or other people said that's really unfair. Brazil's going to win everything because they're good at football, you know. And so as it turned out, that was a really good rule because it allowed a little bit of extra spectacularity, if you can call it that, has happened. So that was nice to see that rule worked, and that was another benefit from the 1990s. So,
who were, in your opinion, the most influencing persons on the evolution of the volleyball? Who are the ones who influenced you specifically?
Well, I've already mentioned at least two of them. Okay, and one of them was Andre Holvey, without a shadow of a doubt. Holvey was the grandfather, the father, whatever. He was the maestro, and he knew everything. You know, as a teacher, I respected him hugely. As a colleague, I loved him to bits. You know, I really did. You know, he was a mentor, absolutely a mentor. But I mean, I had other people as well. Benito Montesi from Italy was another superb guy that I really respected. But going back in history, I mean, I must admit I'm a little bit hazy about what happened in the 50s and so on. But I think when in Central Europe they invented the bagger or the dig, that made a huge difference to the way the game was played. Until that point, you know, everything was received overhand and so on. But as soon as they invented the dig, that was a big step forward. When they moved the antennas in, the antennas were originally 20 centimeters outside the white tape. And so when they brought them in, that made a huge difference to the defensive capabilities of the team. I mean, we tried things as well. Like we tried 4 blockers at one time.
Really?
Yeah, we did. It was a failure. It's another one of these failures, because what happened was you had 4 blockers, and then it left a huge gap in the back court. So the guys would just overhand pass into the back of the court. So it was not well viewed. Making the first pass much more flexible was a huge difference. You know, that really gave the game to the masses, as it were. Because in my day, whenever somebody received service badly, it was whistled, a double or catch. And so there was no rallies. A referee could actually quite happily kill every rally at any point. you know, but no, we don't want to do that. Not anymore. Not anymore. We want to have rallies, and we want to have spectacle. We actually want to have hard services. We want the service to succeed, and the defence to be a little bit weaker. You know, the reception should be a little bit weaker. If we can do that, that would make a difference. But in terms of names, okay, as I've already said, Holve, Mikola was another one. Mikola, in the days when we used to share rooms in the Mirabeau Hotel in Lausanne, Mikola would actually give you earplugs. Yeah. But then at 2 o'clock in the morning, he'd hit your bed, and he said, "Sandy, wake up, you know, and write this down." You know, and if you stayed in the room next to Holvey, you heard typing all night, you know, and there was wafts of cigar smoke coming from under the door, you know. But he used to be good. He used to, and when you did courses, he'd say, "Sandy, I invite you to my room, you know, bring ice." You know, so I'd go along with a plastic bag full of ice from the bar, and then we'd drink whiskey and talk volleyball all night. So these are the kind of people that were my influencers, if I can put it like that. So
you are known as the professor of the rules and the interpretation of the rules and everything, even though you say you wish. And how did you reach such a high level of work and understanding of the rules?
I think when you write them, it makes a difference. Now I'll make a distinction here. I don't make the rules. The commission doesn't make the rules. Okay? The commission writes them, proposes them to the board. The board either accepts or doesn't accept them, etc. And you have to argue your case. You know, it's not a question of, here you go, please rubber stamp these. No, it doesn't work like that. You have to argue that these are going to be good for the game. And to be honest, I really did like to protect the sport. There was a little bit of pressure on me. We talked beach before. And there was a little bit of pressure when we were instructed to harmonize the rules of beach and volleyball. And I got criticism for not pushing them closer together. You know, I must admit, I learned about beach, and I learned that it has a unique thing all of its own, and that you can't shoehorn beach into a volleyball straitjacket and vice versa. So that was important. And I think learning and having an open mind and listening to people and being sensible, and then writing things and then consulting with them again, it gives you a feeling for what the rule is intended to do. And if you know what their rule is intended to do, then you get a feeling for how it should be interpreted on the court. Does it work? Sometimes there are occasions when you have to apply the spirit of the rule rather than the actual rule itself, you know. And if you get a row from your referee supervisor or whatever, then that's I've always said this, that's better than having 15,000 points deducted from the spectators around the sports hall, you know. So 1 point less from the supervisor is better than 15,000 points less from the spectator.
Of course. You are also in charge of the FIVB e-learning and resource center. Tell us about this project of yours.
Right. Okay. Again, let's cover. Laszlo, cover your ears. Okay. Again, this is. Laszlo was instrumental in creating a thing called multimedia material. Okay, and that was as part of the rules of the Game Commission, and it was adopted by everybody because we all realized how much it was worth to referees in instructing and so on. Okay, so that was one thing, and I'm glad that project succeeded, and it succeeded incredibly well, and I still use it today. Well, okay, so Laszlo, well done. There was also another program that came out of Liechtenstein, and one of our referees there had a company, but that particular program was mostly about assessment. So really what we needed to do is have one program, a one-stop shop, as it were, that could do everything. So with the support of Andrew Meyer and Jan Reck and so on, we began to put plans together to create some kind of e-learning. Then with the support of Ari Grassa, we began to build this. And it's really about continuing referee education, that as human beings, we learn all the time. Okay, we are constantly in a state of discovery, and that's important for us as human beings. So we need to be comfortable about learning new things. We need to be eager to learn new things. We need to want to learn. Doesn't matter what aspect of life you're involved in, you need to want to learn. And there's always new techniques. You know, for example, we went from signaling, you know, 2 hits. They've got service to they've got service because it was 2 hits. So that's a technique, you know, and we have to relearn things and relearn quickly. The best referees are the ones who can relearn things very quickly and don't protest. I can't do that. You know, that's not the way we used to do it. So we need to be able to do that. So with this regard, then coming up for the Rio Olympics with Hassan's help, we began to put together a lot of the materials that we had involved in the IRCCs in the past, and the seminars in the past, and the clinics in the past. So we put them together. But we also created what we called different hubs. And we have currently got a webmaster in Lausanne who actually puts the stuff onto the site. So we guys in the commission, mostly Laszlo and me, but anyway, okay, that's how it works. We create the stuff, he puts it on. I've got a colleague in Canada as well who supports in this respect. The first thing that we were tasked to do was to create an examination for the referees. We were given I think 3 months to do it. We did it in a month, and so on. So we got that together. But we also created something called Question of the Month. Well, it was Question of the Week, but we ended up Question of the Month. And that was because there was too much pressure on the people in Lausanne to do the work. So, but it's all to do with consistency. We're trying to get a consistency of approach. So continuing referee education to develop consistency of approach, so that all the referees in the world are seeing the same thing, are seeing what we want them to appreciate is the best way of judging this particular incident, and we take it from there. And we try as far as we can through video clips to do this. And the reason why we use video clips is because if I write something, the picture in my head may be different from the picture in your head. You know, I could describe player runs off the court into the free zone, does X, Y, and Z, and so on. And the picture you have in your mind is different from the picture I'm trying to tell you about. So if we see it in a video, then everybody sees the same picture. So that's important that we all see that. And therefore, any questions that derive from that, we can all replay it, we play it again, oh, well, that's what they meant, and so on. So you get a chance just to relive the moment and to analyze the way that we have already analyzed, and we try and get that consistency. Now, as I said, the rules provide a framework. Okay, it was former secretary of the Rules of the Game Commission was a guy, Pierre Bergerot from France. And Pierre taught me a very important lesson. He said, the rules cannot cover every single accident or incident that can happen. Okay, all they can do is to create a framework, and you hang your decisions on that framework. You know, and that's important to appreciate. So we go with that. A lot of that material has modified over the years since we created it, and what we've done is we've taken it and we've downloaded it to the basic hub. So all the high level stuff, just put a date on it. Okay, it's down there. So now you have a library. and you can go back and see, oh, the 1997, that's what we did, and 2005, well, that's what we did. Why did we change? You know, why did we change that? Oh, must be a reason. So you can at least get a chance to think things through. You know, was it better then? Was it better? Okay, you can decide. But we have different hubs. We have an elite hub, we have an intermediate hub, and those two hubs are probably for referees who operate within a continental framework. So for example, anybody that's operating within CEV's Champions League could access or get information from those two hubs, and it'd be very important because there's things in there for challenges, there's things in there for all sorts of other things, including team tablets and so on. The basic hub tends not to have that because, for example, in my national league, we don't have team tablets or coach tablets, so we just operate in the basic level. So it's designed not to confuse people. You know, if you get all this information about team tablets, you think, what on earth are they speaking about? I don't know. You know, and so they can switch off. So, we've got examinations, and at the moment we're having a little bit of problem because of COVID. COVID has basically shut down Lausanne. The guys and girls in the headquarters are on some kind of furlough scheme. I think they're just beginning to come back in, but who knows, maybe they'll shut down again. They were limited in the number of hours that they could work from home even. On basic volleyball stuff, and that was because the Swiss government was paying their huge portion of their salary, so they were being monitored, as it were. So if they overstepped, they thought, I can't do this. So anyway, so there we go. So that's the reason why some things are not going as well as they might be, and it's unfortunate, but we have put forward the questions of the month and so on. Sometimes they're a little bit later getting in, so there we go. And again, going back to Beach actually has a little bit of an issue with its examination. Examination was actually stress tested to death by a guy called Andre Trottier in Canada and his colleagues there, and we had no problems. We put it online, and all of a sudden we have referees telling me that it's showing incomplete. Oh, so anyway, so we're trying to fix that. We know it's a problem, but it's not going to disadvantage any of the people that are doing the examination. So Rui, relax. Okay, if it's one of you, okay, no problem. Yeah. So what else was I going to say? I was going to say something else about e-learning, and I've forgotten what it was. Sorry. I'll come back now. Yeah. When you're 71, this is what happens to you.
With all the knowledge there, you know, you have to make some arrangement and to put it all in libraries and everything.
That's why I have no hair.
There's no room for hair there. No. Now that with all the knowledge of rules and refereeing, this is the last question before we go to the I'll open the stage for a little bit questions, and then we go to the presentation. With all the knowledge of rules and refereeing that you have, are you still surprised by new situations or topics that come up? Are there still situations that you can say you are not sure about, or that you are still in a learning mode?
Yeah. Let me phrase this like this. When I taught chemistry, my senior students would often come to me and they'd ask me a question. And it's very, very high-powered kids, you know, who would go off and become chemists and engineers and doctors and vets and so on. So these were smart kids. And often the questions that they would ask, I didn't entirely know the answer to. But I always said to them, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find out for you. Mm. And that was important for them. So rather than me bluster and basically tell a lie that I understood what the answer was, I would go and find out. And this is the same situation, the same way that I approach any question that I get. I get lots of questions, as you can well imagine. Many of the questions, strangely, are the same ones. And often you get a question about an unregistered player being on the court. What do you do? You know, that's the kind of question you get. And you get that from everywhere. And you think, why didn't the scorer and the second referee see this? You know, oh, anyway, so that's the sort of things you get. But you also get occasional ones which are really quite important. You get a question like, what happens if two players, two opponents are disqualified in the last set and the team's used up all of its substitutes? You know, you get questions like that and think, oh, right, okay. Has it ever happened? Well, maybe it has somewhere. But you have to find a solution to these kind of questions. But that's where you have to be very careful, because sometimes these things are national issues rather than international issues. You know, Holvey taught me a very important thing. If you asked him a question about what happened in your national league, he said, no, that is not an international question. You know, and that was the way that you really had to deal with that. Now, he wasn't being dismissive of the question, but really there are so many permutations of things that happen in our national leagues that never ever happen in the framework of an international set of rules. Now, everybody wants to follow the international rules as best they can. They want to have coach restriction lines. They want to have, even though they're not there anymore, they want to have team tablets. They want to have X, Y, and Z. Well, all the things that we have at international level. Even though that's not possible for them, so they create some kind of situation, and it doesn't go quite right. So they then say, "What do we do?" Okay, you made this, you know, and you also have to be careful, because often in their leagues, sponsorship is involved, and so if you give a response which actually destroys a sponsorship deal, ooh, okay, the lawyers could come at me from all sides. So you really have to be very careful of that. But yes, there are questions which do come up, which you have to scratch your head and say, well, okay, I'll have to think about that, but I'll get back to you. And even this week, I had questions which came up, and it was to do with what two line judges would be able to signal, because if there's only two rather than four, you know. So I created a little PowerPoint for them, and I said, okay, this is what you can see, this is what you can't see. So you expect the line judge to signal this, but don't expect them to signal that, because it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Okay. This concludes our first part of questions and personal, to know you better and everything. If anybody has a question before we pass to the presentation, you can unmute and ask us a question. You said something you wanted to show?
Nope.
Yeah, now you can talk.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Roy, for this webinars that you have been doing. It's fantastic, and for us, and it's special in our contest, the world contest. It's good to see each other on a different way, but it's good. Sandy, always a pleasure to listen to you. An excellent communicator, and always learning something new. And all the fellows, referees, and Zorica, Lazo, Erpai, I'm glad to see you all beach volleyball referees and volleyball referees that I already ref with them. It's nice to see you, all of you, in a good shape, in good health, especially that.
Good.
Mr. Steel,
Andy,
I want to ask you, what is the feeling changing the suit and tie and become the suit and tie. It's a shorts and a polo and a hat with the same job.
Oh, you mean my position as a supervisor? Well, you see, in volleyball, I always believed that it was my uniform and my thing. As a teacher, I always wore a different tie every day. Yeah, it was a collar job. I mean, I was faculty principal, so I had an image. You know, I had to demonstrate that I was well turned out. So I would. I mean, what do I have? I have something like 150 ties. Okay, so maybe more. I don't know. But anyway, so I used to wear that every day, and I would carry that same idea to when I did volleyball too. But when I did beach, that was a different uniform, and I had no problem with the yellow uniform. In fact, I really liked the yellow uniform. So it's just a question of being able to fit the role that you're doing, and I don't think it made me any less or any more knowledgeable to have a polo shirt or to have a collar and tie. It was just my thing, you know. So and although in VNL we were told you don't need to wear the collar and tie, it just was my thing. I just like to wear it. So there we go. Especially the more crazy the tie, the better. There we go. Good.
Okay. Let's go. We'll start now with the presentation. I'm going to share my screen and allow this presentation to come up and talk. And while we have this presentation, you can talk about it, please, not Mr. Sandy. Sorry, Sandy.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, you got that right. Okay. I mean, I'm known as Sandy, and I like to be called Sandy. So there we go. We were calling this a recipe for a perfect referee, and the question really was: is there a recipe for a perfect referee? So if we go to the next slide, Roy, you will see that. I don't reckon there is, to be honest. Many of the top referees are going to be very close to that, but they bring something different. Each of them brings something different. And it doesn't matter whether that's beach or volleyball. Some are big bears, some are slim, some are smooth, some are and so on. I reckon. I mean, I could be wrong, but I reckon that the best referees are those who are natural, who've played the game, who have actually understood the game, rather than those who have not played to any high level, who have kind of been manufactured by somebody, or who have been promoted because of a friend of a friend of a friend. So those referees, they don't have the same empathy, don't have the same feeling for the game that other referees would have. Okay, moving on. So this presentation's going to try and, it's a very short presentation, panic not, that you realize that what may work for one person may not work for another person. So we have to pick the best thing that suits us, that suits our personality, that suits our way of working. You know, we don't all have the same physical attributes. And in fact, I'll say this, but my wife was a national referee at one point, and she always said that the female referees always had to be twice as good as the males in order to be equal. You know, and there's an element of truth in that, and I think that's something that you may wish to explore. And certainly the ladies amongst us would probably confirm that that's possibly been the case for them in the past, that until they got known, until they actually had been seen on the circuit for a large number of matches. They had to develop ways of working that were perhaps a little bit different from the guys who were working in the same circuit. Next one. So referees have different qualities, and I've listed some here, but you could have a whole other list of qualities here. Obviously, they're confident, energetic, fair, and so on. I'm going to come back to these qualities a little bit later on, so we can jump for the next slide. Moving on, right. Next one. And these are action words. You know, the referee must be an advisor, must be able to evaluate his or her own performance. Okay, ahead of the game, the referee must be able to plan. What am I going to do if the coach does this? What am I going to do if the team does something different? Okay, they must be able to delegate tasks. You know, there's no point in having a team and you doing everything. You can't be a one-person show. So you have to delegate those tasks and accept or not the advice that's given to you by the line judges, the second referee, the scorer, and so on. Okay, and again, I will come back to some of these points. What I will say is, if you look at the right-hand column, refereeing requires leadership. You have to be a leader. You have to be a manager. And you have to be somebody who is kind of like an orchestra maestro, that you're conducting the game to a finish. You're conducting the game in a way that gives the people who are watching and gives the people who are playing a sense of satisfaction that they've been involved in something fantastic, that they will come back and do it again. Okay, every time they'll come back and do it again, because this has been a great show, and probably we'll find that the referee in the middle of all this was never noticed. The referee is somebody who is anonymous. Okay, I mean, I do remember a case in, now it was, I think it was in the 1994 World Championships. I think it was. And now, if I'm wrong, I'm sure somebody will tell me.
We need Mr. Hallway here for his.
I'm sure. Well, he would certainly know. But anyway, it was. I'm sure it was then. And Sweden were playing another team who's, I don't remember. But at the end of the match, the coach of Sweden, a guy called Anders Christensen, came down, or came up to the score table, and he started to shout and wave his fists and so on at one of the referees who were standing there, and I was the referee delegate on the match, and immediately, okay, that's what I did. Okay, I ran down and I stepped between the two of them and I said, Anders, please, this is not the referee who refereed your match. This is the referee for the next match. And he went, oh, really? Fine. I said, look, if you want to shout at somebody and have a conversation about it, talk to me. So we had a long conversation, 10 minutes or so. And at the end of the 10 minutes, he shook my hand and he walked away quite happy. But, you know, the referee was obviously doing a good job because he was so anonymous that the coach could not even remember who he was. And anybody in a referee uniform was going to get it. So that's the kind of thing. So anyway, move to the next slide. So the referee, as I said, must remain as much as possible in the background. And that means that we're trying, and we've said this already tonight, we're trying to eliminate as much as possible those judgment calls that can be protested or can be, you know, the referee shouldn't be accused of saying, you know, giving a whistle at the wrong time, you know, for the wrong team. And it's especially true when you're getting to the end of the match and it's getting a bit tense. Then every single decision that the referee makes is scrutinized. Okay, so looked at under a microscope. Did the referee do the right thing? Should he or she have whistled that particular point, and so on. So this is why I said earlier that we're really in a process of trying to protect the referee as much as anything, not taking away the referee's authority, but the referee does have some tough calls to make, and there's no doubt about it that even with all the technology that we have, we cannot assume that the referee is going to rely on that. You have to rely on your brain, you have to rely on your experience, you have to rely on the different qualities that I showed a little bit before, which we're going to come back to in a moment. So let's go to the next slide and see what some of those qualities are. Okay, now these are hard skills, most of them, but some are soft skills. So the people qualities that you have, the abilities to communicate with people, I'd describe them as soft skills, whereas the hard skills are things like making a substitution, calling a timeout, or, you know, operating within the framework of your remit as a second referee or a first referee. Those are hard skills. But how you communicate with coaches, how you communicate with players, okay, those are the sort of things that we can call as soft skills, and we need to be able to do that, and we need to be able to do it in a way that is kind of, what can I say, conflict management. You know, it's kind of taking away a lot of the stress of a situation. When people are having a fight, and you're trying to soften this fight into a more of a discussion, then instead of facing on, if you turn sideways, you know, it takes away a lot of the face-to-face eye contact, you know, the stress of somebody leaning into somebody's personal space. So if you're shoulder to shoulder, it's much easier. So that obviously doesn't work too well as a first referee, but it does work as a second referee. So if you are, for example, discussing, as you should do, what the challenge is for in a match, you know, face-to-face is not always good, but sometimes a little bit more shoulder to shoulder may be more conciliatory, and may well be, you probably even hear better in a sense what the coach is asking for. So always be able to communicate in a sensible way, and you know, so on. But anyway, the referee must have many sides, must have many attributes, and so on. So next slide. So how about confident? Let's say the referee needs to be, for example, a Fabrizio Pasquale. Has to be like that. The referee has to be, you know, Fabrizio was cool, or he was smooth, okay? Or you have to be like Mockery. Now, Mockery is absolutely smooth, and he's so supportive. You have to be like to have the face, the eyes of Umut Sukulu, you know, who would just look at you in a particular way, and you know, no, it's okay. No, I didn't mean anything. You have to. What do you have? You have the authority of Susanna. Susanna is absolutely precise in what she does. You have to have the people skills of Patty Rolfe. You know, you have to have all those things. So imagine you've got all of those things wrapped up into one person. You know, that would be wonderful. But even then, it may not give the perfect referee, but it gives a referee who certainly has all the tools to operate. You know, but confident for sure. You need to exude confidence. You're not swaggering. You're not swaggering, but you know what you're doing. You have the confident walk. You have the confident air. Your head is up. You know, you're energetic. That doesn't mean say you're diving around everywhere. Referees need to be smooth, and energetic referees I've seen on videos, they look a little bit panicky. So be careful about what we mean by energetic. You're energetic in the sense that you're communicating. You are able to go to the coaches. You know, you have so many minutes left as a warm-up and so on. You're energetic in that sense, okay? You have a fire about you, but it's in control. And you have to be seen to be fair. You have to be trusted, you know? You have to be straight down the middle. You are the judge, you know, like in a trial, that you are evaluating the evidence and then you're coming down on one side or the other. That's basically what objective means. But you're resourceful. Now, as an international referee, probably it would seem like you don't have to be resourceful. That maybe as a national referee in the wilds of Scotland, maybe you need to be resourceful and supply your own net or supply your own antenna or whatever. But resourceful in the sense of you know the rule. This doesn't fit the rule exactly. I'm going to make a decision based upon my interpretation of this, and I'm going to come down on the side which seems to be just. Natural justice is important. You know, if teams think you're being unfair, then there's a barrier. If teams think, well, okay, well, I can accept that, fine, and you go on. You know, these are the kind of things that make a difference. So, and in order to be that resourceful person, you need to know the rules inside out, and you need to understand what the rule was intended for. You need to be a person who has read underneath the rules, so it's actually gone in depth and has traced all the words and has come back to me and said, Sandy, what does that mean? You know, and we had an example recently of somebody who was quoting two cases in the casebook, and they seemed to contradict. You know, and it was one of those situations where you had both teams were given a red card at the same time, and it seemed to say in one case that you gave you penalised the serving team first, okay? And the other one, it seemed to say the opposite. But I had to point out, look, no, actually saying regardless of which order you give the red card, you give the point, you know, or you give the penalty against the serving team first, and that way it all evolves to the right point, and the same team that was serving continues to serve, and the team that was receiving service continues to receive. Both teams have rotated, and so on. So you have to understand that kind of thing and go a little bit forwards, and if you don't know, if you don't understand that, come back to people like me, come back to people like Laszlo and say, okay, explain that to me a little bit more. Rational, okay, rational, be logical in the way that you evaluate things. Okay, next one. Go for the next slide. Okay, so we've already mentioned about this maestro, Zenovic, who has just announced his retirement. Zenovic, we could describe as a director. He was a maestro. He would conduct the match from beginning to end. Okay, and he was a performer. Is a performer. Okay, I don't imagine he stopped refereeing, but this is the sort of thing that a referee does who is at the top of his or her game, you know. So these are the things that you do to be a manager. These are the things you do to direct the game, to set standards, to be a motivator, to motivate your own team, to make eye contact with your team, to keep them involved in the game, okay. To understand, to empathize is to understand what the stresses are on the players. One very famous Serbian referee, coach or delegate pointed out quite correctly he was there as a technical delegate. I was there as a referee delegate, and he came into our meeting and he was invited in and so on. And he said, actually, most yellow cards are given to players because the referee made a mistake. You know, and it's true. You think about it. I mean, how many times have we actually had to react to a player's bad reaction because you made a decision that maybe wasn't the best decision you've ever made? So this is important, that we're consistent, we're fair, we understand, and we use appropriate body language when we're doing it. We don't do, if I can say this, we don't do this, you know, we don't do this talk to the hand stuff. We don't reject, you know, all this rejecting. That's in some parts of the world that's really, really offensive, you know, and it is in Scotland as well, but I would imagine it's even worse in some places. So we try not to do that. And if you as a referee are doing that just now, please try and avoid that and do something different. You know, you can prevent people approaching you in all sorts of different ways, but this rejection, this talk to the hand stuff, no. But if you can be a people person, great. If you have the ready smile, you know, smile, that's good at the appropriate time, and you're not laughing at the players, but occasionally things will occur, and you can react to that. I'm thinking in particular of Poland, where certain music is played, and the entire bunch of spectators behind the referee does exactly the same motions as the referee. You know, these are the things that are humorous, and a little bit of laughing behind the eyes is good. I'm thinking of one of my Italian referees, who has a ready smile all the time, and he uses his eyes, not Fabrizio, okay, but another Italian, and the joy in his face is really infectious, and he employs his natural abilities as a communicator just with the face and the eyes to great purpose. So I have no problem with that. And when he and I worked together in one of the World Championships, it was under 23s, I think it was. He was surprised that I thought that his style was really good, because he said that he did lots of criticism from referee coaches, etc., who didn't like this. I said, well, you know, you're controlling the match. You know, you're doing it in your way. We're not robots, and we're trying to get away from that. So these are the sort of small changes that we've tried to make. The game has gone much quicker, as I said before, and that means that perhaps now we have to rely less on being the straight up and down referee, more of a referee who can actually make sense of what they are seeing and maybe take better optical position to see, you know. So it's not always necessary to be straight up and down. You know, you can move a little bit just to see, because then you can see the ball hitting the block and going through the block and so on. It's a better angle to see. So these are the kind of things that we're trying to sort of blend into the game a little bit. Next one. Okay. Now these actions evolve naturally. So the referee does all these things, advises, evaluates. Now, if referees should always evaluate, and I think maybe in the future we will have a session, Roy, about referee evaluation. But always we should sit down at the end of a match with the people that we work with and just look at things and say, how well did that work? Could we have done it better? You know, and if we can do it better, then next time we should do it better, so that everybody is happy with what we've done. Referees are probably the best organizers. You know, if you look at any big event, most of the people who are actually know what should be done are either people who have done it for many years themselves, or referees who actually know that this is how wide the free zone should be. This is how much space you've got for this. This is how we organize the antenna. Yes, the antenna are outside the white tapes. Remember that, you know. Yeah. So you sometimes get things like that, even in top events. You think that doesn't look right. Oh yes, you put the antenna on wrong. Okay, but so the referees need to control and anticipate. Anticipate is really important. Anticipate the event, not the whistle. You know, referees need to whistle. It's pretty obvious. And beginner referees, I don't know if any beginner referees are here, but beginner referees sometimes they need to be trained how to whistle and when to whistle. But in order to work well, referees need to anticipate an event. They need to know that the set is going out to position 4 and that the attack is going to be there, or it's going to be a short attack, or it's going to be a combination attack, or it's going to be a backline hit. You know, they need to be aware before the thing happens. You know, and you need to focus your attention on the portion of the net where the attack is going to be, so that you can see the block touch or the rebound from the net band, and which is another thing which we will talk about maybe another time. But these things only come with experience, only come with an understanding of playing the game, only come with an understanding of tactics. So all these things are wrapped up in the best referee. The top level referee knows all of these things and has probably been a good player at some point in the past, or if they haven't been, they at least understand how the game should be played and what stresses the players are under. And therefore, when they react to the players' bad reaction, they at least can understand that maybe I shouldn't give a yellow card at this point. Maybe a quiet word would be better, because if I give a yellow card, that's maybe because I made the mistake in the first place. So, and finally, they observe. Now, many referees who watch things on television, they see what they want to see. They don't see the minute details. They don't see that Susanna has stepped in or Susanna has stepped out. They don't see that Patty Rolfe has made eye contact with the captain of the team and said, no, that wasn't the fault. You know, they don't see all those small details. But the referee who wants to develop as a referee needs to be able to see that, needs to see that the Rui, for example, will actually do the right thing, intercede, know when to interact with the teams and when not to. You know, these are important things that referees learn. You know, we don't always get it right, even though we're experienced, but by and large, if we've understood the game, we can actually know when to intercept with the players and when to stop the play. You know, referees should not be people who think, I haven't blown my whistle for some time, I better blow my whistle for something just so that people know that I'm here. You know, and that usually happens when it's the second referee, not done anything for a while. Oh, look, there's a player with 1 millimeter outside the warm-up area. I better whistle and tell them to get back in place. You know, it's what Jim Coleman, my old friend, used to call peripheral refereeing, things that were not important. You know, so you have to be careful what it is that you're actually whistling for, and don't interrupt at the wrong time, because then you interrupt the server serves into the net, and you get the blame. Yeah. So next slide. So, right, so we naturally evaluate ourselves, we naturally evaluate referees' performance, we work on our skills, we recognize that there are referees out there who are fabulous. I've mentioned some of them already. There are others. We should act professionally, even if we're not paid as professionals. We look underneath to see the underlying principles. We find out what the game is really all about, not our own vision of it. And we give the lowest level match the same respect as the highest. You know, that no matter what level we're playing at, we give these players the chance, their only chance perhaps, to aspire to something great, to have their time in the sun, as I've called it. You know, and it's true. You know, some junior players will never aspire to the full national team, But if you give them respect, give them the chance to be good, maybe they will. But they deserve their chance to actually show what they can do, and that applies to all players. We're trying to allow the players to do what they do best, which is to entertain the crowd, entertain the spectators on TV or in the stadium. Okay, next one. Right, so what's a good referee? Well, I don't know how much time we got. I'll try and keep this a little bit shorter. If we go to the next slide, we'll see some of the things that referees should be able to do. Right, okay, first of all, they're going to do all the things that they're taught to do, which is arrive on time, correctly dressed, okay. To be honest, I don't particularly mind if the referees go casual to the match. Some people think they should be dressed up. I don't particularly think that. I think if they're comfortable and they're respectful in the way that they come, they pass the alcohol check and they go into the competition hall after they have done the discussion with line judges and scorers, etc., and they go in as a team. Now, to me, it's important that everybody goes in as a team. First referee, second referee, etc., all arrive at the same time. And I think the same thing also applies in beach, that we try and get all the people to go in at the same time. A lot of stuff goes on behind the scenes, but you arrive in the court as a team ready to perform. Okay, the protocol is conducted properly. You're keeping your eye on it and so on. Be brave. Sometimes, certainly at some of the big events I've seen recently, some of the coaches have tried to do things that were a little bit against what the rules were saying. For example, you're allowed 5. Okay, so what happens is the five are on the score sheet. So what happens is the coach takes himself off into the spectators and he sends somebody else in. Right? That's not allowed, but that's what the referees need to be aware of. So you need to be observationally aware of what's happening on the court. So it's not enough simply to stand and admire the players warming up. You need to know what you're doing. Okay, next slide. Mechanics. You've obviously briefed the NTOs in a friendly manner. You're going to tell them all the things that you're going to need them to do to help you, because that's their job. Their job is to support you. They advise you. They don't insist. Okay, that's important to be aware of, that they advise, but they don't insist. Okay, and in terms of decision making, then obviously you're making accurate judgment calls. Okay, and you're applying things like substitution processes, well. You're not, if you're doing a very high level match, you're expecting that all of the technology will work, and therefore you do not need to hold anybody on the sideline for a substitution. You don't. Okay, you don't even need to make the crossing over signal. If it's happening automatically, I've seen players absolutely doing the substitution themselves. Okay, so second referee is there, and afterwards the second referee thinks, I have forgot to make that signal. So they do that, and you think, what are you doing? What's the point of doing that now? They've already crossed, they've already done their thing. So think carefully about what you're doing. The mechanics have to mean something. The signals have to mean something. So don't just simply do them because that's what you expect to do. If you've got all the technology, you don't even need to make that. Carefully what you're doing and work from there. Next slide. All right, play at the net, perhaps the most important thing of all. So you must be able to see and respond to the most obvious touches. Respond to the net contacts of the antenna, respond to the players contacting the antenna as well, which is less obvious. It's not so easy to see that one, but nevertheless, that's the line judge's job to help you with that. And so on. Be willing to whistle the antenna contact if you're second referee on your side of the court. A lot of referees will indicate, but they won't actually whistle. They must whistle. Okay. Second referee, focus on net and center line. We modified the activities of the second referee in order to make the focus more on what's happening here, the important parts at the net. That's why we reduced. This was in the time of Gabby Krause, when Gabby Krause was president of the refereeing commission. We reduced the number of actions of a second referee with regard to libero. So the libero attempt to block, attack hits and so on, but we took away the one where the libero sets in the front zone and it's attacked and completed. So we took that one away to give more time for the second referee to look at the center line and the net. Okay, and that's important to understand where that came from. That's a development that actually has an impact on the work of the second referee today. Okay, so all the things about double contact and so on. Be aware as referees that we whistle the most obvious ones. We try and get the game to continue. Going back to Laszlo's multimedia presentations, we had videos in there that showed the player in a very bad position to make an overhand pass, but we allowed the game to flow. We allowed that, and we said this is important. So these are the things that referees need to understand. When is the player in a bad position? When is the player in a good position? When do you allow this little bit of extra leeway and so on? Okay. Right, so we've got a whole bunch of things there. As I said, I'll try and keep it a little bit shorter. Focuses on net, willing to whistle what's obvious, double touches and catches, awareness of key positional play. Yes, I know that this is something that we're working towards at the moment, but in the past, for example, I've had referees who didn't really understand player positions. And I was working with Nati Tarum, and Nati was, he was a referee delegate and I was a technical delegate, and we were in Poland, and the match was between China and, I think it was China and Poland, to be honest. The China team were stacking their players on the left-hand front of the court a lot. And to be honest, 2 out of the 3 occasions they were out of position. Okay. The second referee didn't whistle any of that. Okay, but the coaches of Poland were Italian, and they were the statisticians were, and they were at the back of the court, and they could see all the side-to-side overlaps, you know, and they were going absolutely crazy. And at the end of the match, I remember having to stand between the second referee and the Italian statisticians who were berating him. So Nati asked me to get to the blackboard, chalkboard, and we went through all the various permutations, and that was fine until I went back to my room, and then I had a knock on the door, and it was the same second referee. He said, "I still don't understand it. Can you tell me again?" So I had to explain to him again that situation. Now, that's the kind of thing that international referees should not be failing at. That's a very basic thing. We should understand systems of play and know them inside out so that we don't get caught in those situations, you know. So, right, next slide, Roy. Okay, authority, body language, and that's the way of moving. When we went from the second referee mirrors the first referee, remember we did that before. When we went from that to the second referee doesn't do that and simply moves to the side, what we found was that the referees really didn't know what to do with their hands. So basically they had their hands by their side and their hands were sticking out, and then they shuffled sideways and they looked like penguins. And so good body language is much more about how you move. And a nice, smooth, controlled walking movement is much better than shuffle, 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 sideways, sideways all the time. So these are the sort of things that body language is all about. Second referees control their area of responsibility. They're consistent with their whistling. First referee is the same, and they should apply fairness, equal balance to both teams. Okay, they're not more harsh with one team than the other. They're not more friendly with one team than the other. You know, and that's a difficult thing to judge. Be nice, be polite, be smiley, shake hands, all those kind of things. But don't go up to the opposition coach and hug. Don't pat the player on the head. You know, don't do that kind of thing. That's not seen as being very clever. Okay, next one. All right, challenge issues. All about that one. And a lot of referees now have experience of challenge systems, but they may be different. You know, in CEV, you may have to be the challenge referee and the second referee at the same time. So you go and you check the challenge operators. Whereas in FIVB, it's a standalone position, and that's important for us. Nevertheless, you should be able to communicate effectively with the coaches, and you ask them, please ask them, what's your challenge for? Because so much time is wasted by the challenge not being expressed clearly, and the second referee not actually getting it clear, so they know what the challenge is for. So you get the wrong image on the screen, and the coach goes crazy, you know. And then knowledge of what is allowable in the challenge. What can you refuse? You know, you need to be able to refuse a challenge, and not many referees I've seen will actually refuse a challenge. Fabrizio was one. Fabrizio Pasquale was one that definitely refused the challenge correctly, because it was really not a sensible challenge. Okay. I don't really need to say much about dress, demeanor, and physical appearance, because we're all going in the same kind of direction, that we are athletic. Our BMI is within a particular range, and in terms of demeanor, we are the point of contact. We are the person who's actually giving the information. Now, if I'm in an airport and my flight is delayed, and nobody gives me information, I get nervous, you know. I get nervous, I get anxious, and I can see all the people around about me getting nervous and anxious too. I think the same thing applies to coaches and players. If you give them information, then they're much happier than if you don't give them any information. So communicate properly, and you will get their support as much as you get support from your own team. Okay, I think I'm done. Am I nearly done? Yes. So that's what makes a good referee. I think any referee that gets to an international course, for example, should be able to do all of those things. I think to make an excellent referee, you require a little bit more, and we might talk about that another time. Okay. I've now talked a lot. I'm sorry. Sorry.
I just woke up. I put some water on my face and everything. It was perfect. It was very, very perfect and very, very interesting. Thank you very much, Mr. Steel. Well, Sandy again. Sorry, I have to work on that. I will open out the stage for any questions regarding the presentation that we just had. If anybody wants to ask any questions or say anything, please, you can unmute or just raise your hand and I will try to unmute you.
Probably they've all gone to sleep.
Whoever is still awake, yeah.
Maybe I've covered everything.
I guess when there are no questions, nobody understood what you were talking about. Somebody told me that.
Probably. Well, they've all gone off to make coffee. Stay awake, stay awake. Well, if we're doing this again, they can think of more questions and they can come back next time.
Yeah, of course, of course. So again, Sandy, thank you very much for being with us. It was a very, very, very interesting and very informative meeting. First of all, learning about you personally, about your way of thinking and your career, and to know you personally. I think most of the people still know you, but to hear that from you, it was very interesting. And again, the presentation, I think most of us will take it and even show it and use it around in our national federations. Hold on.
Oh, I see a message from Paddy Roll.
Yeah.
Paddy wants to say something.
Now it's allowed. You can unmute yourself if you want to say something. I hope.
I appreciate it. I was yelling with my hand through the phone. No, Sandy, I think, how are you, Sandy? Nice to see you. I wanted to say quickly, because I've been on a few of these calls in terms of women in officiating, right? I did one recently with the Caribbean Federation here last week. And I think another important thing I just want to tell the group is, you know, we often say, how do you become a great official? I think besides actually being a player participating in reffing, is that you watch the best in the world, right? You watch the best referees in the world, and as players do, you see what the greatest players in the world do, and then you try to execute what they do. You take the best of the best refs, as Sandy mentioned before, and that was very kind of you, Sandy. And you use as many of the tools you can. Now, you know, sometimes you'll never be as good as Vlado, for example. Vlado has a certain way about him. I've watched him many times, how he handles teams. It's very hard for me to pull off a Vlado move because of the fact that the man is about 6'6". I have put on a few pounds in an attempt to be about as big as Vlado, but can't seem to work on the height during this this event. But my point with Sandy is this: as I transition from officiating into coaching, right? Sandy is one of the great coaches, and I think if you have an opportunity to watch Sandy work. And Sandy, this is not just tooting your horn, and I apologize, but I think this is an educational moment for everyone, is that Sandy has an incredible teaching skills. Of course, he's a teacher, and I think this is what generates his incredible ability as a coach. Great teachers are great coaches, and Sandy's ability to work with referees that are very highly skilled and ones that aren't as highly skilled, who need more training. And I've learned so much from Sandy personally over my course of my career. And I'm telling you, all of you, I think it's important that you know, for me, there were a few moments in my career where it was challenging, that I felt like I wasn't going to be good enough. I felt like I was being coached. I don't know if you know Bear Bryant or Bobby Knight, but I had some tough coaches, and it wasn't so easy. I had people, I still remember, and I think it's important, I had my first national officiating event where I did my first match to get my certification. And one of the coaches told me I was so bad that I should stop right there and drive home. And this is a true story. And I was 23 at the time. And I think to myself, if I literally would have gotten up and did what that coach said, and by the way, this was an international referee that told me I was the worst thing he'd ever seen and that I shouldn't even be at the event and I should go home, that if I would have gotten up and literally gone home, I would never have reffed again, because that's just too much, right? Particularly for a young woman. So luckily a man heard him and came over and told this guy to go away and spoke to me and said, Patty, you're fine. You made a few errors. Now let's correct it. And I think Sandy is one of the great ones. Sandy has such a way about him. I think if you want to, if you're working with young referees, or if you're doing coaching, which I know all of you are, you know, if you have a chance to watch Sandy or people like Sandy, his skills with working with particularly women, but all referees, is exceptional. And Sandy, I just want to thank you for that. You know, I don't got much time left in my career. I think one of the things I'm going to miss the most is your coaching, and I think everybody should know that you're one of the great coaches of all time. Good.
Well,
thank you for letting me say that, Roy.
Yeah, for sure. Sandy, if you want to answer anything, if you want to say something.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's really kind of Paddy to say that. And I'll be honest, it's such a pleasure working with top level referees. I include Paddy amongst that group. Paddy has an amazing ability to analyze, and I mentioned already Zoritza as well. Similar but different, you know, that they can analyze their own performance, analyze other people's performance, and really cut to the important aspects, but still give that personal quality, that people skill that I mentioned already. And I think that humanity is really important in a referee. And I think if you can enjoy what you're doing, then you give everybody else the opportunity to enjoy what they're doing too. And I think at the bottom line is really that we serve the game. We're not stars, but we try and do the best we can, and so that everybody has a good time. And that applies from the lowest level to the highest level. And if people can go away thinking we've had a good time, we may have lost, but we had a great time doing it. You know, I think that's key. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Anybody else wants to say, to comment something? So, Sandy, couple of words, final words before we finish this meeting.
From me, well, as I said, it's been a pleasure. I think I said at the beginning that I'm always kind of embarrassed that people actually want to listen to me, and it's nice. It's nice. I mean, I have to say that I'm slightly humbled, bigly humbled, if I can use that word, bigly, by the fact that you're listening to me now and that you wanted me to say something. But it's been great. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Okay, we should do this again sometime. Let's make a date.
Yeah, well, we have a date next month. I think at the beginning of next month, we're going to have another meeting and for another presentation and work on and talk about. There's so much information that you worked on and you have to share with us, the referees. So I'm going to, of course, publish it later on for next meetings and everything. It's going to be a nice series of Still in Touch. And okay. It will be a very big pleasure for all of us to be there. So again, thank you very much for being with us, Sandy. It was a real pleasure. I will upload everything again to the YouTube, and I will share everything on the WhatsApp group and all the other groups. Thank you very much all for being with us.